such an asshole.
So this guy can smell when I'm about to have a day off. Then he comes in. Well, this is not as normal, as complicated question as he normally sends. Hi, Aaron. Hope you're doing great. Here's a new video request for you. Please name the price. My girlfriend is a recruiter at a place. After having dealt with a few job candidates who have a BA in psychology on their resume, okay, this is important, a bachelor's of arts, not a PhD, just a BA on their resume, and finding them mentally. After having dealt with a few job candidates who have a BA in psychology on the resume and find them mentally unstable and thus unsuitable for hire, she now dismisses pretty much any candidate who has a psychology degree on their resume. I urged her not to generalize like this because so many other factors matter. I'm going to agree with you just on simple principle, but she is convinced now that whoever studied psychology in college can't possibly be a sane and good candidate. I think most people who major in psychology are lazy assholes. I think most of you therapists are leftist pieces of shit. BA all the way up to PhD. I think your field is fraudulent. I think there's there's barely any efficacy in it. I think you've made people's lives worse. And I think the American Psychological Association is a Marxist leftist organization that fucking hates men because you guys are the motherfuckers that came up with toxic masculinity. Now, you could go and look on the internet, find it, form your own opinion, right? I hate the psychology profession. It's like teachers where it's like, yeah, you got to prove to me you're one of the good ones. And we do. I know some good teachers. We all know Dr. David Maloney. We know Dr. Helen Smith. But on the whole, you're a field for lazy 17-year-olds to go and avoid real work and the arrogance and hubris to think that not only do you know the human mind and can recommend and solve and all that other stuff, but at the age of 17, you're going to major in it and you're going to tell all these other people how to think about their brain. When you graduate with your master's at what, 23, 24? The fuck out of here. You zero real world experience excuses for shit. And no wonder people are getting worse mentally in the United States. No wonder. All right. So that's my opinion. However, the client is right. There could be, so they got a BA, or they might go on and get a CPA. A lot of young people are told to major in dumb shit by dumb adult children called teachers and their parents. Right. So I don't, just because someone got hoodwinked, are you going to assume that I'm a finance bro? Bro, because I majored in finance? Well, you'd be right to be skeptical, but you should at least give me a shot. So generally, no matter how much I hate psychology, the profession, the industry, the research, by the way, you guys have a little veracity crisis over there, don't you? They're finding out, like, what was it? Only a third of psychological studies that were repeatable. So now all the research from 50 years? Don't quote me on the specific numbers, but it's like, oh, it's been bullshit this entire time. But yes, not everyone who's a sociology major is a bad person. Not everyone who has his MBA or her MBA is a 103 conforming IQ dude, bro. Who among the two of us do you side with and why? And so I said, well, what qualifies? Hang on. So I asked, I said, what qualifies in her mind of being mentally unstable or suitable for hire? Did they jump on the table and start pissing over paperwork or what? And are we talking only BAs, no masters or PhD candidates? Finally, how many data points, right? If she's interviewed a bunch. And here are the answers. So what qualifies in her mind of being mentally unstable or unsuitable for hire? No, nothing that dramatic. Just generally exhibits signs of being a pain in the ass or asking way too many questions and having way too many back and forth email exchanges. That could just be age. Now, maybe his girlfriend witnessed that BA in psychology have way more too many questions. Would it also be fatherlessness, right? Your dad should be the one to tell you there to shut up and get to the point. Your mom, let's talk about her feelings and emotions. So, all right, let's go along with that. This recruiter has all the BAs and psychology majors have talked too much and emailed way too much. Let's just say it's only BAs and psychology. Okay, let's just go with that. And are we talking only BAs, no masters, PhD candidates, etc.? Only BA. Okay, there are only BAs, bachelors of arts. This is important because I don't like defending the psychology industry. I think most of you are you're fucking scum. You're fucking scum. However, there is a league of difference between people who get a BA in psychology and those who go on to get their master's and PhD who are serious about practicing in the field. And so I don't think it's the type of degree necessarily that matters as much as it is the level of the degree, because if you go on to get an MA or a PhD, that means you are more serious and probably more professional. And I'd be curious what percent of BAs in psychology go on to be actual psychologists versus how many were just Becky's and Trisha's like, oh my God, I'm like a paper. Dude, we heard this all the time. And back in the 90s, it was child psychology in the 90s. I'm not joking. Like if you had a pie chart, 48% was child psychologist. And then another 48% was HR. And then the remaining was liberal arts bullshit that wasn't going to get a job anyway. And you'd be working at the truck stop. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to help you out. Trying to make you girls go into STEM and actually have jobs and not be in debt. Anyway, dude, the child psychologist. I want to know the percent of those gals that actually went on to get their master's and PhD. And well, you know what? Let's look that up. Oh, yeah, right. We're going to get an AI answer. Approximately 49% have an advanced degree. 14. 49% of psychology bachelor's degree holders have an advanced degree, with roughly 14% earning a graduate degree in psychology. Well, which one is it? How many psychology majors go on to graduate school? Okay, go on to. Okay, 14%. Okay, it's 14%. The minority of BAs in psychology go on to get actual advanced degrees. So that's 86%. There was something they had some graduate school, they got other certification. No. How many went on to actually be able to practice? That's what I want to know. And so far, the data, which is a little murky, detailed, it looks like the majority, 86% of them don't go on. So I think the BA degree where they don't have an advanced degree, you're looking at lazy, sorry, not too bright, girls who want to go and guys who want to go major in fluffy bunny stuff. I want to work with children. I'm a people person. Yeah. Does that reflect psychology, the field or profession or the study? No, it's a selection bias of lazy people. And that's where I'm kind of curious. In other words, I would speculate if you had someone with a BA in sociology, a BA in journalism, you're going to run into the same problems, right? But I could be wrong. So far, I would say, okay, yes, it's a BA when the only way to go and make more money was to get an advanced degree and go into practice. So it indicates a laziness. In other words, there's a bias selection for laziness. It's not necessarily psychology itself. So I think things would definitely change if she got a master's candidate or a PhD, but that's obvious because if you go on to get a master's or a PhD, are more industrious, regardless of the field you happen to be in. So it's BA only. And finally, how many data points? And he says just one data point. And now I was like, come on. Come on. No, wait. One? One? No. And this is where he's right, I'm right, and she's wrong. You cannot say a BA, look, don't become that HR bitch Karen, right? Don't be throwing people's resume because of one bad thing. I remember this fucking boomer, worthless scumbag Karen. I was on an interview. I remember Wells Fargo. Don't know where she is now. And I wish I was more assertive or had more confidence in faith. And I knew how dumb boomers were. Because I went in for the interview. She's like, okay, why should I hire you? I got a million resumes just like yours. And I'm thinking, like, you got a million resumes just like mine? Which I should have said, so then you didn't look at my resume. That's what I should have said. Because ain't nobody worth full-time school with that GPA, no help from their parents. What if anyone does that to you guys? Because you're not going to get the job. Just say, can I see my resume? I want to see what I sent you. And then you just say, how many hours of work did I work? How many hours per week did I work in addition to going to school? What was my GPA? What's my degree in? And just see if they even looked at your resume. It's like, madam, I am not like anyone else that has walked through these doors. So just you look at my resume again and you see how much I worked, what my GPA is, knowing I had no help from my parents. And if you want, that's what I should have said. I probably would have stood a better shot, right? You're running the risk of becoming that. I've seen all, I don't need any, you guys are pissed at me. And now just hear me out. In Bizarro World, in the multiverse, right? It would never have happened. There were way too many. It wouldn't have happened. But if Wells Fargo had hired me at that time, which was way before that, and let's say you guys at Wells Fargo had your fucking heads out of your ass. He said, holy shit, look at this guy. We might want to put him on our risk assessment, something more than just rookie file data entries, man. We need brains at a different, this isn't not to slam on you. Listen, we need an officer over at HQ. We need Fuller to analyze where the tanks are before Operation Market Garden. Look up that one. I could have probably prevented Wells Fargo from taking a $50 billion bailout. I could have helped you guys. And she runs the same risk just on one person, blanket not hiring, not even entertaining a BA in psychology. I mean, look at the other stuff that they got going on, right? Look at some circumstantial evidence. Did this person work? All right, is that person enrolled in grad school? Even if it is for psychology, again, worthless fucking joke of a profession, but at least they're industrious enough to get a master's degree or go on. So, again, don't like defending psychology majors. You're a huge net negative to this society and culture and economy. But in fairness of the individual, yeah, that one data point, come on. I think you're going to run it a lot worse if you look at like journalism majors or political science majors or whatever. And then the final thing, what's this job for? Okay, let's say you're the most stereotypical BA psychology, no advanced degree major of all majors, right? Your name is Becky or Trisha. You're from the suburbs. Mommy and daddy paid for shit. You're a low IQ, lazy, worthless human being, right? You got nothing. You just want to avoid math, so that's why you say, I mean, psychology. Oh my God, I am a people person. Right? You just this work avoidant fuck. They did get a degree. And even in these times where the quality and caliber of getting a college degree has gone tremendously down, right? It's nowhere near what it was like, say, 1950, where like you really had to work hard for it. She still showed up on time. She still took her courses or I'm assuming it's a woman. It could be a guy. They passed, right? I've said this about women's studies. Women's studies, it's just the most ridiculous, pointless, worthless field. It shouldn't be a thing. However, if you get a PhD in that, you're not that dumb. You're reliable. You're responsible. You could show up on time. You know how to write. You know how to communicate. So this person who managed to go and get a degree, just remove what it's in for a second. Well, they got a degree. And unless you're hiring something that's important, requires math or thought or intelligence, do you just need someone to be responsible? Well, now, the amorphous, non-tangible things like talking too much, way too many questions. I get that. But I don't know if I'd, at this point in time, with an N value of 1, apply that to all BA in psychology graduates. Yeah. If you're looking at BA in psychology and that's it, you're fishing in a sewer. You're probably not going to find the best or the brightest. You're going to find some wackadoo. Oh, hang on. You're, but that doesn't mean you can't catch a good bass out of that pond, if you know what I'm saying. But then I did want to do some research because I remember. Yes, how not to become a millennial. I looked into the psychology profession and I tried to find out how many of them are saying themselves. Now, I don't have a copy of that book here. I found some other data. Maybe it's the same data I cited before. And I screenshotted it. And, big asterisk, because psychology industry, psychology profession, you guys can only repeat 1/3 of your studies now. So now the psychology study done on psychologists and the psychology profession, I got to wonder about the veracity of these research reports. That's why we use research shows, studies suggest. This is why we have the always available Professor Fuckwitz come in and lay down the law. This is why none of the social sciences work, because you guys can't get jack shit out of poverty. So all those exceptions aside, it looks like, yeah, psychology majors in general have less health, less mental health. They're worse off mentally than the average person. Now, again, you could say, well, wait, they're in the field, in the profession, so they're more prone to seek psychological help. And you're right. People who work as mechanics are probably more like, oh, I need a transmission. They're more likely to go to a transmission guy, a mechanic. But let me pull up the data here. Of 800 psychotherapists, 84 had been in therapy, and only 2 of those respondents found it unhelpful. So 84. Now, just so you know, I believe it is half the U.S. population. Most people will go to a therapist in their lifetime. Half are diagnosed, I think, or regularly see a therapist. So 84% have gone to therapists. That's high. That's higher than average. However, again, it could be because, well, they're in the field, and naturally I have a problem. I would talk to a therapist. So I'm like, okay, I could see it. There are some interesting sub-findings in the Pope and Tabanachik study. Based on this single study, there's strong affirmative support in response to the question, do therapists have their own issues? Well, of course. And do therapists get depressed? 61% of respondents reported discussing feelings of depression in therapy. Similarly, another large survey found that half the respondents reported relationship difficulties or depression. Not too out of line with Americans or regular people. And then say yes to either questions. We asked a lot of follow-up specific types, things like we found that 8% of respondents said yes to that broad mental health difficulties question. A little under half said yes to the diagnosis by a professional. Okay. Survey burnout rates medical practitioners, including 42% of psychiatrists and mental health professionals. That could be the industry, because psychiatrists, that's your actual MD. Those are real doctors. Some studies suggest 30% have felt life ending, and 4% have made an attempt at ending their lives. 4%. 4%? The self-deletion rate, I think they measure in tens per 100,000. 1 in 25 of you have attempted it? That one right there, I'm kind of like, ooh. One study of more than 1,000 randomly sampled counseling psychologists found that 62% of response self-identified as depressed. Of those with depressive symptoms, 42% reported experiencing some form of self-deletion, ideation, or behavior. Now, I could go on, and remember, these are psychology studies and surveys and polls, so we don't know if they're true because the psychology profession is such fucking shit at its job. But if we're in the ballpark on those, yeah, the joke, why do people major in psychology? Because they're mentally ill. They want to figure each other out for themselves out. I mean, there's probably a little bit of truth to that statement back in the day. I'm like, yeah, okay, a little wackadoo and crazy. Doesn't mean they're bipolar or other mental illness, schizophrenic. But now maybe that is true. Maybe there is a correlation between mental disorders, let's say, whether it's full-blown mental illness, self-deletion, or you're just a little bit on the spectrum. All right. I'm not talking when I talk mental disorders, whether it's a genuine mental illness, I'm not talking what privileged white people from the suburbs do to make themselves feel popular so they have an identity and they fake it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like real mental issues, not you people who fake it for attention whoring. I mean, the people who really suffer. Yeah, so far the data, dubious reliability as it might be because it comes from once again, the psychology industry. Yeah, it looks like they're more wackadoo than the average population. So the one thing she might be right is, yeah, the lady probably talked too much because she might actually have, there's a higher chance she's got a mental illness or a mental problem, let's say, than someone without a degree in psychology. Right. But that's one data point. Come on, man. Come on. Come back to me with at least, look, if you're going to be a recruiter for the next 10 years, like 5 years, why don't you track? Here is my challenge to her. Why doesn't she keep an anonymous spreadsheet, measure talk too much, communication problems, and I know she's not a psychologist, so she wouldn't be able to diagnose it, but then again, you psychologists don't seem to be able to do it yourselves. Why does she measure all people with BAs in psychology? Why not, out of fairness, bring them in for an interview, right? Not to hire them, right? UHR people just fuck around with people all the time for your own ulterior motives, just to see if they're wackadoo in person, right? And let's see when she gets, say, 20 data points. You should be able to find 20 data points. Maybe we draw some conclusions then, all right? But yes, is the psychology profession filled with short-sighted, I'd say unethical, politically biased to the left, academic frauds and hacks with a small minority who actually give a shit? Yeah, it's not a clean pond you're fishing in. Do people with undergrads tend to not be as serious with people with grad degrees? Yes. Yes, there is. And do psychology majors, it seem right? Shows suggest we don't know. Repeated and only 2/3 on 1/3 the time will this data be repeated. Current research data polls indicate, right? Cannot prove because I don't trust your data, frankly, psychology industry on yourselves. It looks like they suffer more mental problems than the average person. Your theory could be completely legit. It is not fair to be bigoted against anyone on anything. Degree choice, although I wouldn't hire women's studies major. I don't need to get sued today, right? If the rest of the resume looks good and the job does not require a lot of advanced shit, I think you should not immediately throw everyone who has a BA in psychology into the garbage. Look at other shit. Like if they're on the fluffy bunnies, anti-Trump, anti-Israel, Marxist sorority Festivus for the rest of us club, probably want to eschew that. If they come in, like you see their profile and they got a bunch of tattoos and they're ugly or overweight and they come in and they're not hygienic, okay, that's another issue. But I would not be throwing away resumes simply based on that if someone with a college degree can do the job, right? So as long as you're not you don't need a chemical engineer or some kind of advanced tax accountant, if this is like, serving coffee or clerical work or whatever, I would at least if they're qualified, if they got the experience, bring them in. And then let them prove to you that they're cray-cray. But come on, data point 01? No, that's what Democrats do. That's what leftists do. Oh, and yeah, don't date psychology. I'm just going to tell you now. I'm just going to tell you now. You can date them. You don't want to. I will say my anecdotal experience is, yeah, they're a little fucking wackadoo. They're not reliable. Some could be full blown. I remember, yeah, one was mentally ill. I'm like, nope, you're fucking crazy. No, wait, two. One had to drop out of ROTC. Remember that one? That one was on drugs. Okay, so two. I probably remember more, but the other ones were like, dude, for someone who studies the human mind, you know how the fuck to show up on time? Do you know what punctuality is? MMR, $5. People go into psychology to understand their own mental issues. I believe there is some veracity to that. Auticus, $10. One of my degrees is psychology to understand myself and my issues better. All right, so we have a self-confessed data point here. Do not conflate psychology major with activists. I know plenty of psychology majors that are good people. Right. And that's why I'm like, hey, don't write it off immediately. But it's a yellow flag. You say psychology major, I'm like, oh, okay. Mike, $10. Was a psych. You have no idea how bad it is. Imagine failing stats 303 even with SPSS. Did you fail stats? No. CA. I'm sorry. EE podcast, 5 Canadian. I wonder my corpos don't hire psychologists to work for them. It would never work. I wonder why corpos don't hire psychologists to work for them. It would never. We're not even talking psychologists. Like psychologists would be in their own field and profession. We're talking a bachelor's of arts in psychology, which you cannot practice. You could go work for some nonprofit and help out people who hate you. Here, let me give you some hardworking people's money because I have a BA. Oh my God, you're homeless. Please, here's some hardworking person's money. Will you have sex with me? I'm a BA in psychology. I hate those people. Vito, €2. Horse, snakes, reptiles, the triad of batshit crazy. Yep, correct. All right, Cappy's got a shower. Cappy's got to get ready. Cappy, go ride around. We'll see you guys later. Toodles.